Of course. And I muted myself. There's no audio. Yeah. Okay, cool. Is audio here again? Does it work? Can anybody confirm? Uh, okay, all good. Okay, cool. So what I was saying is, after last stream, I ran a poll to kind of get a vibe of how people enjoy their streams. Turns out that most people don't watch the stream live. About 20% of people watch it live, and the rest watch it, afterwards, which makes sense. People are in different time zones. But the people that do watch it live want to watch it live a little bit later. So that's why the stream is now starting at 8 instead of starting at 6. Which is cool. Another thing that we kind of asked was like, hey, massive echo in the sound. Uh, I am. I mean, is it better? This thing should not. This thing should not echo at all. I'm not sure. Is anybody else getting it? No echo here. Okay. All right. So all right, I got lost. Yeah, so I made the poll. I asked people what they want, and what came out of it basically is that so most people that replied, at least, said okay, they're interested in the in the new concept stuff. The renders are interesting, but not as interesting. The new concepts are more interesting. The Q&A is interesting. But there we also have a little change, which is that a lot of people asked for us to, provide some sort of form for people to ask questions before the stream is live. Of course, for the people that are not that aren't going to be able to partake. So we actually sent out a little poll, not poll, like a little form for people to fill. So the Q&A section is actually going to now have some live questions, some pre-asked questions, kind of like mixing it up. And yeah. The other thing is, and this was the biggest feedback is people are interested in finding out about more stuff. Like, yeah, we show renders, we show concept, but it's only so interesting. So people generally wanted to know, honestly, a little bit about like every part of the process and what we do and how things are going. So what I've decided to do is to oh, hold on, check this out. We're about to get an upgrade right here. Um, what I decided to do is kind of like switch it around. Instead of having the uh, is there a logo on screen now? There should be a logo on screen now, apparently. Oh, oops. Okay, instead of having a, first I was doing like 30 minutes what do you call it? Okay, first I was doing like 30 minutes of renders, then I was doing like 30 minutes of, you know, um, concepts, and then I was doing 30 minutes of Q&As. But it was kind of very stressful, honestly, to try and like cram it all in there. So instead, I want to go a little bit more free flow. I mean, there's a reason why it's called a hangout. It's kind of like to hang out. And so the way it's gonna work is I'm just gonna, talk a little bit about, essentially like give you. I'm gonna start with a studio update, and kind of go like through all of the various parts of the studio and kind of let you know like what has been going on lately with the studio. Since for this part, there is not that many things that I can show, because a lot of stuff is like still, let's say, work in progress, not ready to show. So I created a little video with like our art, that you can now see, in the background, so you can see our art, which I think is cool. Um, and yeah, whilst that video is running, I will kind of talk about the studio stuff. Then after the studio update, we will talk about concept art. I'm going to showcase concept art for the stuff that is coming out in December and talk a little bit about that. And then finally, we will have the Q&A at the end. Yeah, let's. I think we can kind of just get to it, and I can let you know what's up with the studio. So, as many of OPR is not that small anymore. We now have a nice big team of around 40-ish between concept artists and sculptors and um, illustrators and web designers and writers and so on and so forth. So there's quite a few like departments that we now have and that we now run at OPR. So I'm just gonna kind of go through them. So concept art. Concept art. Well, I mean, you will get to see more in the December in the December section preview section. But concept art is going good. So we are currently about I'm gonna say halfway. No, actually, Hmm. We're actually nearing the end of the Ratman concept art phase. We have designs for most things. They're looking very cool. We have designs for the terrain already. Not sure exactly when that's going to go into production. And yeah, the terrain stuff is kind of like eh. But anyway, the Ramen concept art is done mostly, and it's looking very cool. And this has allowed us to shift our focus now on our next faction, which is the Battle Sisters. We already revealed, in the last couple of roadmaps that the Battle Sisters are coming starting in December. But now I actually have some concept art to show you, so that's going to be very cool. And generally speaking, yeah, concept team, everything is going smooth. Um, yeah, it's going well. There's not too much to tell you there about the concept team. I suppose. Well, I suppose we'll talk about it when I'll show you the concept art itself. Sculpting team. Okay, from the sculpting team, the sculpting team is expanding. We now have a new sculptor on board who's still doing a trial run, but it's doing well. Actually, we hired another new sculptor last month as well. So having more sculptors means for us, of course, that we can produce more stuff. But ideally, it also means that each artist now has a little bit more time to work on their things. There's less pressure on having. You have to understand, we used to be just like two sculptors working on the monthly release. And we would work during the month on the things that were coming up the next month, which was quite stressful. And so we are expanding the team so that we can kind of create a little backlog and so that artists can also focus more on quality rather than just quantity. This, of course, is also going to be improved by the fact that we're going to switch back from 3 armies down to 2 armies. Now, just to clarify, it was never the intention that we would stay with 3 armies. This was kind of like an exception because, we were doing the demons and it was so many demons. It was kind of crazy if we had only had demons for a while. So we said, well, the Star Hosts have been in production for a while, and we had promised that army like 2 years ago. So, we put them out in parallel to the demons. And it came out looking really cool. But yes, so starting in January, we're going to go back from 3 armies down to 2 armies, which also is going to help the whole team be able to you know, chill out a little bit, not be so stressed, focus more on quality. Also take a break sometimes. I feel like it's so easy for us to get lost in the sauce and just focus so much on work that we forget to take breaks. Um, but also, well, okay, one thing that I suppose I have to say, like as a disclaimer, is like we used to release 2 armies a month, and each army would get 4 units, so 8 units in total. And whilst we are going back to that thing of only having 2 armies, we are increasing the number of units that are coming out per month for each army. So instead of 8 units, you're basically going to get 10 units per month. So a little bit of an increase there, but not so much that it's going to destroy us, stress wise, like the whole demons release did, because the demons, before we were releasing 8 units a month, and now we were suddenly releasing like 14 units a month, more or less. So which is like more than 50% more, whatever. Um, and so, going down to 10 units feels like a solid balance with the size of the team that we have, and also with the fact that we are now going to be switching to armies that are bigger, and reuse the same anatomies more, right? So, for example, with the Ratman, it's true that every unit has its own clothing and weapons and details and all the cool stuff. But the base anatomy is kind of always the same, and that actually saves us a lot of time. And allows us again to focus on the quality of the sculpts. Um, with that in mind, the sculpting of the demons is almost done. We are essentially only missing a couple of less demon units, and then we still are missing a couple of avatars and epic avatars. But overall, the demons are basically done. And outside of that, we are going to start working on the Battle Sisters. So I just had a call today about it. And Monday morning, we're going to start with the Battle Sisters. They're very cool. Again, I'm going to show you some concepts later, but just to kind of like give you an idea of like how our design process works. So the way that we're kind of like doing armies now is that we start with a sort of we start with a really pre concept phase where we kind of have like an overview of the whole army that we create just to get the vibe of the army. And then after that, we go into like a slightly more focused phase where we start to, let's say, solve problems or like, define things better. So like, okay, what do the weapons look like? What do their symbols look like? What are their basic shapes? What are their assets like? What are additional details that they could have? Things like that. And then after that, we kind of do a very, 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 very rough sketch of like the vast majority of the army so that we have a full overview of the entire army, and we can make sure that the design language is remaining consistent throughout the entire army. And then after that, we start going into the first anatomy. And so that's basically the work that we're going to start next week, which is we're going to make the first basic anatomy of the Battle Sisters and their armor. And this is kind of like a very rough block out of the whole thing, but already defining proportions, defining thickness, defining the head size, defining all the things that we need to define for miniatures. And once we have that, then that sculpt is used as a baseline for the concept artist to draw over. So the concept artist, they draw over the actual anatomy, which helps a lot to kind of understand, like, okay, how do we make sure that the concepts maintain the right proportions, that the right level of detail, that the scale is correct. Because just to give an idea, like back in the day, we were kind of well, I mean, back in the day, back in the day, we were sculpting without concept art. But once we started sculpting with concept art, we kind of had, every artist kind of like have their own style, and they didn't have like one consistent anatomy that they were drawing over. So there was a lot of, let's say, a lot of confusion happening there in terms of like concepts, and therefore then like the execution of the sculpts. And so with this method, we're kind of like aligning everything. So yes, the sculpting team is doing well. We're finishing up the Lost Demons, and we're starting out the Sisters. And of course, we're working on the Ratman in the meantime. The Ratman are very cool. That's all I can say. We have already finished the work on the November models. I think there's only one thing that needs to be finished. And we're basically already starting the December stuff. And if things go to plan, the sculpting team is has built enough of a backlog that starting in technically, I mean, if everything goes well, starting in November, we're going to have no delays. But ideally by December, we will have no delays at all. Something that delayed us is, of course, the fact that we decided to redesign add parts of the design to some of the Lust Demons. So, the Lust Demons, the Lust Demon champions and harbingers, and ascended harbingers and avatars, whatever, they have this extra set of arms that kind of slips into an attachment. So in the the thing is, like, originally we this was the idea that we had, but we only showcased them kind of slipping into these giant arm attachments, and so everybody kind of thought like, oh, okay, so these champions have these huge, like, they were dubbed like the gorilla arms, these huge gorilla arms, and that's all they have. um, and so to clarify that and to showcase that, like, no, actually, this is just an attachment. We went back and we resculpted the champion, the last champion, the last beast champion, the harbinger, and the ascended harbinger, with different attachments that are not just the big arms. I think all of them have a sort of like empty hand attachment that actually has like a beautiful glove. They have some sort of gauntlets. Some of them have whips. The one that's like on the beast has a sort of um, like a spike. Yeah, it's interesting. Um, but yes, that has of course also delayed things a little bit. But I think in the in the big picture of it all, it's a good thing. It's a good thing that we're actually doing that, and we it sucks to have delays. Um, it is tough. I have to admit, it is very tough to have delays. But at the same time, I guess we can find some solace in the fact that in a year from now, people are only going to see the models, and nobody's going to remember that they were like a week delayed, and nobody's going to care. And it's just we're going to have cool models, so that's what matters. Okay, so that's the sculpting team. Now let's talk about the illustration team. So in the background, you can of course see a lot of beautiful illustrations by the OPR team. Which okay, so I don't know how many people realize this, but we have a big we've been pushing over the last year-ish, since the beginning of 2022. We've been doing a really big push towards lore and illustrations. This is of course all still in the works, unfortunately, so you're not really seeing it, but it's coming. And well, you can see already that there's a lot of illustrations that have been made. And so what is the illustration team focusing on? So the illustration team works on primarily on two things. On the one side, they work on these sort of, let's say, unit showcase illustrations, which is what you're seeing here above or on the side, whatever. And so these are illustrations that focus on a specific unit, and kind of like give you a sense of how do these miniatures actually look like in their world and in their environment. What settings are they in? What kind of things do they do? How do they fight? And so on and so forth. And that's one of the things that they do. The illustration team does. But another thing that the illustration team does is they work on the what we are calling the guides. So the faction guides. Well, we're starting off with the world guides. What are the world guides? The world guides are basically these. The world guides are basically going to be these little booklets that contain all of the history, and um, and a lot more information about each setting, about Grimdark Future and about Age of Fantasy. And they kind of have a similar layout. So basically, what they go through is like, so they tell you about the history, like the origins of these worlds, and like kind of like the history of the setting, and how we end up where we are currently in the setting. And then they kind of explain like, well, how does the actual universe work? How how are things structured? What do places look like? And very practical things also for you to understand, like how you can then create your own. When you're playing, you can create your own stories in the setting. Like, how does magic work, and how does transportation work, and how is communication, and how what is everyday life like, and what do people dress up as, and kind of giving an overview of the setting as a whole, so that you can kind of have like an intro to the whole thing. And then after that, after those two guides are released, so the Grimdark Future World Guide and the Age of Fantasy World Guide, the next thing that's going to be coming out is the faction guides. So the faction guides are kind of the same thing. So if you come from Warhammer, you probably know what a codex is like. So think about like an old school Warhammer Codex, but without the rules. So a faction guide contains all of the history of faction, their where do they come from, where are they, what is their language like, what symbols do they use, how do they write, how is the everyday life like, where do they come from, how is their structure, and then of course also things more focused on the actual like warfare side of it. So how are their army structured, and examples of different color schemes and stuff like that, and different types of like for instance, I don't know if you're doing robot legions, like different legions, how do different legion work, and what are their goals, and what do they look like, and then of course at the end also like going through every unit and giving you some lore for every unit. And yeah, it's gonna be like a nice thing. Like, for the way that I describe these things is like, for us, the world guides are an opportunity to fall in love with the setting as a whole, and the faction guides are an opportunity to fall in love with those specific factions. It's gonna take some time to release everything. Um, yeah, it's a huge effort. I have to say, it's a huge effort. We have a great team. Right now, we have, I think, 9, 10 illustrators with us. It's a very big effort. Takes a lot of steps to make these type of things, but I think it's going to be well worth it. Um, yeah, so that's the illustration team. Oh yeah, and so just to kind of give you an idea of where we are now, the illustration team started with, so okay, how do we create these guides in a very succinct way? We kind of like, we start with first of like an overall layout of the entire thing. So we kind of decide like, well, what is going to be in this guide, and then we decide where do we put illustrations about what, and then which illustrations go where. And then we start with a concept push phase. And so the concept push is basically a phase where um, artists make a bunch of throw out a bunch of ideas for each of the illustrations in the book. So we finished the concept phase in September, um, and and my god, like, I don't know, I ended up with like over 500 illustrations. So it's a huge effort. And now from those illustrations, we kind of picked, okay, everything that kind of really makes the Age of Fantasy setting. And now we're in the actual illustration phase. So taking those concepts, we're illustrating them, so that then we have the final thing. Um, which brings us to the next part, which is the next team, which is the writing team. So the writing team, yeah, I don't know how many people know this, but we have a full writing team right now. We literally just are trying out a new writer, starting basically this week, next week. Right now we have, let me double check, we have 6 writers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we have 6 writers on board. And what are they working on? Well, one thing that they're working on, of course, is the world guides. So um, you know, laying out all the history and the content and whatever. And then um, they are also working on short stories. So short stories are basically 4 or 5 page stories focusing on a specific character or faction or situation or whatever, to kind of help you, get into the setting. We currently have already a couple of short stories finished, maybe 5 or 6, something like that. We're trying to build a little backlog, so that then once we start publishing the short stories, the idea is that every month we will be releasing one Age of Fantasy story and one Grimdark Future story, so that you can see, you can kind of like get into the world as well. So that's cool. Yeah, it's very nice to see the whole thing come together. So you have to understand, like, the settings are based on this original lore that I had created many years back, and then I kind of showed hints of in the army books a little bit. And then we spent like almost a year with one of our writers, Robbie, working on an actual lore Bible. So going through all the factions and kind of really focusing and saying like, okay, what is this faction about? What is the story of this faction about? What are their conflicts? What are their tragedies? How do they function? This ended up being like over 100 pages of lore, and yeah, it's a big thing. And now with that, the short stories are being made and the lore Bible. So it's an effort that's all slowly coming together. And another thing that's also coming out of that is that we are we're expanding the army book lore. So right now, each army book has like, I don't know, 250 words of lore, and that is being expanded. So you can expect. I don't remember exactly how many words it is. Maybe it's like 750 words on each army page. So, um, you know, in the future, when you're gonna open up the army book, you're gonna have like a nice chunk of lore. Of course, you can ignore the lore if you don't want it. It is what it is. But if you're into finding out about our setting, you can actually get a good intro there, and then from there you can go check out the world guides, and the faction guides, and then the short stories. We are really expanding more and more, where um, where you can get lore from. Yeah. Oh, and actually, one more way that you're going to get lore is the comics. So you guys probably have already seen Serious Business. It was a comic strip about the grimdark future, made by Pierre Mortel. Really, really great stuff. And we have been working on a new comic, this time for Age of Fantasy. I literally got the finals of the comic today, I think it was. And it's very cool. It's going to be called Squip. I don't want to reveal more than that right now, but very soon, probably in November, we're going to start releasing a new comic. And yeah, it's going to be fun. You can expect another 10 episodes of that comic. And then we're going to go back into series business, and then kind of like switch Grimdark Future comic, Age of Fantasy comic, and kind of like switch between them. Um, yeah, I think that's going to be cool. So that's the writing team, and then let me see, what else do we got? Community management. Okay, community management team. We have the wiki, so we have a new wiki that we just put live. We were very frustrated with using fandom as a wiki. It was just so many ads, and it was horrible to use. So now we have a new wiki, definitely worth checking out. And right now, of course, the wiki has like mostly stuff about like tactics and stuff like that, and also pages where you can see like, hey, I have this miniature, and like, what can I use it as in OPR and stuff like that, which I think is very helpful. But I think it's gonna be very cool once we start releasing all of this lore, that the wiki is going to slowly be populated with the OPR lore. So I think it's going to be very cool once all these different stories are connected, and you can just get lost in the wiki, and just find out more and more and more about the setting. And I think that's going to be real fun. So yeah, that's on the community side. And finally, we go to the last thing, which is game design / web dev. So this is this is where I come in more, than anything else. So in all the other things, of course, I act as you know the art director and the lead and the whatever manager and project manager. Blah, it doesn't matter. But where do I actually get to let out my creativity most is the game design. So I am happy to say that I've been working a lot on game design lately, which has been very fun. I had kind of, due to a lot of like production issues, I had kind of, you know, I couldn't find as much time to work on the game design, which really sucks. I'm gonna be honest. I mean, I started this whole thing because I was just making games, right? So it was sad not to do that, and now I'm focusing more on that, which is cool. So what is up with game design? Mission packs. So on Patreon, every month you get 8 missions, for you to play with. It's 2 missions per game. Right now, of course, it's just Grimdark Future, Firefight, Age of Fantasy, and Skirmish missions. In the future, I would love, once Grimdark Future FTL comes out of beta, I would love to actually start releasing missions for FTL as well. That'll be very cool. But anyway, so it's been I mean, time really flies. It's been 18 months since we started the releasing the mission packs. And now finally we have 18 missions per game, which means that next month in November, we are going to actually bundle them up and put them on the store. So if you're not a patron, or if you missed out on missions or whatever, you're going to be able to buy these packs. So it's going to be 4 packs, each one with 18 missions. So a total of like 72 missions. I think my math is right. It's 72 missions. And the cool thing is, like, all the games kind of work on a similar engine. So if you buy all these packs, you can kind of use the missions for any of the games. So this is plenty of game content. Like, I know that for a lot of people, they just play like the standard, missions from either the core book or from the full rule book. Um, but yeah, these missions add a lot more flavor and a lot more cool stuff. So I've been working on that. I've been preparing. So because those missions are coming out next month, I've been working with Austin on the actual and with Ryan as well. With a couple more people, of course, Ivan, whatever. A bunch of people helped out, and we're working on the mission packs for the next season, whatever you want to call it. Basically, the next 72 missions that are going to be released over the next year and a half. I'm happy to say that we have now half of it done, and I'm hoping to have the rest finished soon. So that's cool. Also, I have been able to go back into working on cell swords, and yep, I don't want to, reveal too much because I don't want to compromise too much, but I think I've been going back and forth on cell sorts so much over the last, I'm gonna say year and a half, and I think one of the main issues that I had with cell sorts I've had so many issues with cell sorts, but one of the main issues I had with cell sorts, I think, is that I personally didn't fully click with this idea that I'm making a game that you can only really play if you have these like narrative campaigns, because it feels kind of like restrictive, and it kind of also puts a lot of pressure on us because it means like there's going to be this very specific content that we are going to have to keep making, and the game is not sort of like infinitely replayable. So with the help of Reese, another one of our designers, I'm working on essentially a mission generator. So your primary way to play cell swords outside of campaigns and custom missions and all that stuff is you're just going to have a nice big mission generator, where you can essentially generate missions, generate campaigns, and infinitely replay the game. And I've started work on that, which is very cool. I'm feeling very hype about cell swords again, which is also very cool because I've been kind of like not been enjoying cell swords for a long time. So it's nice to be hype about it again. So cell swords in the works. Hopefully out soon. Not sure when. Grimdar Future FTL. It's going along smooth. I think if my math is not wrong, it should be out of beta in February, March. I suck at this. Anyway, somewhere there, early 2023, it's gonna be out. Yep, that's gonna be cool. And yes, there's a couple of other things that we're really kind of like starting to tinker on and work with, that I cannot go into too much because they're so rough. But we started work on a mech game, but that's very, very, very early. And also, I've started a planning phase for essentially a new way, a new full rulebook, or rather, slightly changing the way that our things are organized. So right now you have, by the way, of course, this is all work in progress, all a big maybe. Who knows what's going to happen? But right now you have the core rules, then you have the basic rulebook, then you have the full rulebook, and then you have like the extra stuff. And I want to simplify this. I want to kind of simplify this to where you're going to have the core rules, so the one page of rules, as you know and love, the thing that started it all truly. You're going to have the core rules. Then you're going to have, what is currently called the basic rulebook, but it will be called something different, which is basically like the expanded explanation of the rules, for all the people that especially for new people that are not really sure, and for people that maybe want a little bit more detail and they don't find that the core pages are enough. That's for them. And the full rulebook is going to change into something else. It's not going to contain instead of right now the full rulebook is like 30 something pages, and like half of it is essentially just the basic rulebook, and the other half is all of this extra stuff that you can modularly bolt onto your game. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the full rulebook, cut out those 15 pages of essentially just basic rulebook, which is free anyway, so who cares, and replace them with 15 new pages of more options. So expanding on some of the options that we currently have and adding new options. So really giving you a big, solid pack from which you can grab anything you want and create your own experience. For me, OPR has always been about sort of like opt-in experience. So the core rules are very, very basic. It's all you need to have a cool experience, and then you pick and choose, like, hey, do you want the extra activations? Use them. Do you want random events? Use them. Do you want campaigns? Use them. So yes, that's what the full rulebook is going to morph into. It's going to morph into this larger pack of cool content that you have. Essentially, I'm going to double the content you get. I think that's the gist. Always trying to give more. Okay, but aside from that, I think the big question that everybody has is 2.50 beta. When are we coming out of it? So, well, when it's ready. Unfortunately, it's always that. But so the release of the 2.50 beta depends on the web app and the Army Forge, because we want to make sure that once we come out of beta, all of these tools are properly functioning. I've been talking. I had a call with the web dev team just 2 days ago. Things are going well. We're working on it. Implementing a lot of features that we need. A lot of it is backend. A lot of it is stuff you guys are never gonna notice, so it doesn't really matter for you. But yeah, we're working on it, and once everything is ready, you are going to have access to we're going to come out of beta, and then you're also going to have access to all of the tools that I use to build armies, so that you, if you're a patron, of course, you're going to be able to build armies from scratch, in a much more expansive way than you have ever before. It's incredible. Truly, it's a game changing thing. Okay, I think with that, we have kind of gone through all the teams. So yeah, so we shall move on to the concept stuff. So how the hell do I share screen? Right, share. All right. Can you see? Yes, you should be able to see the screen now. Okay. So yeah. By the way, I just want to throw this out there. So I know that a lot of people asked when we had that poll asking about what you want to see in the stream. People asked, like, hey, can you talk a bit more in depth about lore as things come out, and can you talk a bit more about like game design and stuff like that? And it's like, yes, I want to, but it has to come within its own context, right? Like, I'm not gonna just suddenly, like, it makes no sense for me to just randomly explain, like, oh, okay, so why do the robot legions have rending on this unit or not? It makes no sense. So I will try to integrate that stuff more as new things come out, and as changes happen. So I think it's going to be very cool once we're out of beta. If, like, imagine we're out of beta, and then during the month we update a bunch of armies, and then at the end of the month when we have the stream, I can kind of go over, like, hey, this is what's changing, this is why, and like explain things more. Okay. All right, let's look at concept art. So we're looking at the December previews. Starting with, okay, let's start with the Ratman. Okay, so for the Ratman, what do we got? So starting off with the Grenadiers. Um, so the Grenadiers are an interesting bunch. They are, well, I suppose I can talk a little bit about lore and rules at this section. Um, yeah, the Grenadiers. So the Ratmen basically have they kind of live in these big castle cities, and they have many different sort of like guilds and clans and things inside. And one of them is this sort of like um, engineering guild that they have, and the engineers are kind of like, um, well, they're a little crazy. Let me put it that way. So you have already seen the weapon teams that are coming out next month, which all are a little wacky and cool, and the Grenadiers kind of follow the the same design patterns. But yeah, so what are the Grenadiers all about? Well, they're basically like grenade throwing rats. In the rules, actually, they're kind of interesting because they're actually so usually they have in the indirect rules so that you can throw grenades over other units. But usually, when you have the indirect rule, if you don't stand still, then you get a -1 to hit when you throw the bombs. But they have a cool rule called expert thrower, which allows them to actually like move and throw grenades without suffering that consequence, which is cool. Makes them more versatile, and more, you can be much more aggressive with them. Um, so yeah, so we have the basic grenadiers that have these sort of like fire bombs, and then so actually originally in the rules they only had these sort of like poison bombs, but with these new models we're kind of changing them up. So now they start off with fire bombs, which are I think 12-inch A1 AP1. So your basic like AP1 thrown weapon, but then you can actually upgrade them with these sort of like toxic bombs. So the second model that you can see here is the well, here it's called a weapon carrier, but basically it's a rat dedicated to having a backpack that sort of like has a mechanism that fills the bombs with poison. And there's a little rat buddy in the background that's kind of like helping out. Um, yeah, and so basically you can upgrade them, and they can go from throwing these fire bombs to throwing toxin bombs, which have the poison rule. So the regular fire bombs AP1, you can kind of use them against armor, whereas upgrade to the poison bombs, and now they have blast, not blast, sorry, they have the poison rule, which basically like deals more hits, so it's good against like bigger units. Okay, so following the same line of the engineering guild, we have the actual engineer. So this is a hero. The engineer hero, he's a little bit like an evolution of the regular grenadiers and the engineers that you find on the weapon teams. So he has like a bigger cape, and he kind of like has this cool backpack that he uses. Well, so again, talking a little bit about the rules. So the Ratman heroes are kind of modular, and so you can make your engineer have this sort of like toxin rifle thing. You can have him fight with a hand weapon or whatever, but you can upgrade him with essentially like this tunnel drill that he can use to ambush with a unit. I think that's it. So you buy this thing for him, and in the terms of the miniature, you basically you put the backpack on him. He holds this drill, and then you put him in a unit, and then this unit can ambush. So this is actually very good because I mean you could put him in a unit of like 20 warriors and cause mayhem in the back line. So um, yeah, that's cool. Then what do we have else? So that was the Engineers Guild. So far, you guys have seen Warriors. You've seen the Captain, which is a more veteran like part of the Warrior section of the Ratman. You've seen the Engineers, the weapon teams, so on and so forth. And now we're going to show something new that you haven't seen yet, which is the more religious part of the Ratman. So we start off with the monks. You can see them here. We actually were working on the monks right before this call, so it's cool. So what is this all about? So basically, the story of the Ratman is that well, essentially they were kind of created by accident, so to say, by human waste, truly. magic spillage in human sewers kind of created the Ratman. And then when they kind of became a thing, humans were like, "Oh my god, you're abominations," and kicked them out. And so they were pushed out, and they went from faction to faction, and everybody was like, "You're abomination, you're an abomination," and pushed them away. And so they kind of found this sweet spot. Well, they found this spot to settle in where there was nobody. And the reason there was nobody there to settle is because this is like right in the center of a lot of different factions, where a lot of factions clash. And so they sort of built these huge castle cities, and they're basically constantly under siege. So that's why when you look at our Ratman, their whole vibe is this very like medieval castle thing, but also very like worn out. So you can imagine them like at the beginning they were like beautiful and noble and everything was cool, and then as they just kept getting attacked and attacked, everything is kind of like slowly deteriorating. And at some point in their story, what happens is that they're basically well, long story short, their whole thing is about to fall apart. They're being attacked by enemies on all sides, and this god figure appears, and essentially smites all their enemies and then disappears, and basically saves the Ratman from certain death. And this god is they call it the Rat Mother, and so the Rat Mother is their goddess. And so the monks, and the priests, and all that stuff, all of the religious section, all the religious section of the Ratmen is basically in devotion to the Rat Mother. And actually, like their symbology is always kind of like about the Rat Mother too. It's kind of representing the halo, this imaginary halo that they would have for her. And as we go on, you're going to see later units that show even more symbology of the Godmother, the Rat Mother, and yeah. And so okay, we start with the monks. They're cool. They have dual hand weapons, or they have these sort of like sensor flails. They have a cool little like bell as a musician. Nice standards. Yeah, these are gonna be cool. And then the monks are going to be led by the priests. So okay, you can see here. By the way, I'm not sure if I should be answering questions from chat at the same time. I feel like now I'm trying to be more relaxed about this whole thing, so maybe I could maybe select questions. Yeah, just because I saw a question now that was interesting. So, did said god actually look like a female rat, or is it the interpretation of the god? It's funny. I picked this question, and I actually don't want to get into it, so I'm not gonna review more. Yeah, I'm not gonna reveal more. Okay, so sorry. Okay, so the priests. Yeah, the priests are basically like the kind of like the wizards for the Ratman, and they kind of invoke the power of the Rat Mother. Um, and yeah, we actually have two versions of the priest here. The left version is one that's going to be on this sort of like platform that we're building later, and the right one is the standard priest on foot. And as you can see, like so, the symbol of the Rat Mother is a sort of like halo with spikes, and so the priests actually wear a sort of like backpack that kind of like represents this symbol. Yeah, and you can see it kind of everywhere. Like if you pay attention to it, you can see that their faction symbol is infused with this story, and this story actually kind of is shown throughout all of the models. Because part of the story of the Ratman is that this new religious thing is kind of it's slowly taking over the faction, but not everybody fully trusts it, and it has its own dark secrets. Interesting. But yes. Okay, so that's Ratman for December. I think there's actually. I'm sorry. Let me double check something. I think there, like I said, there's actually 5 units per month now. But I think maybe I don't have the concepts for the 5th unit yet. Yeah, I don't have the concepts. So okay, no more concepts for Ratman. All right, let's move on to the Star Host. So the Star Host. I mean, Star Host, we're gonna go through rather quick. I've already spoken so much about Star Host design and lore and whatever. So I think we can just kind of like go through this and revel in just the epicness of the concept. So, Gator veteran, the hero version of the Gators. Really cool, really big. He has this cool mace-like weapon. Probably we're gonna have to thicken this up for the sculpt, but yeah, it looks really cool. He has some sort of like gun on his shoulder, like the other Gators. Here he has this sort of like elongated mouth shape. Not, don't think we're gonna be able to do that. Unclear. But I'm gonna wager that we're not gonna be able to implement that. But the overall design is very strong, and he's gonna be a sort of like melee beat stick. So yeah, I think he looks very cool. Then what do we have? We have the Starseer. The Starseer, well, it's basically a gecko priest on a sort of platform. Yeah, and he kind of like, the idea is that he kind of floats around, but to make him stand upright, we actually use like cables under the platform, which feels a little bit more sci-fi. It's very cool. He comes with a cool staff, and he also comes with like he has this sort of like um, big glove thing, and then he has like a little, he has different like magics things there. So he has like this little planet thing, and then he has like a magic ball. I've seen the 3D model; it's very cool. That's all I can say. Okay, then we have the swarms. Yeah, the swarms are cute. Also, the models have already been made and they look very cool. We made almost all of these. I think we made the frog, the turtle, the crocodile, this sort of like other crocodile thing, the little gecko, the dog thing, the snakes as well. Yeah, the swarms are cool. They're just like a jungle swarm, but they're all robotic, and they're all kind of cute in their own right. But let's move on to the cooler stuff, which is the big stuff. So we have the Spinosaurus. This is a big guy. I actually have a Spinosaurus model right there, but I'm not gonna go grab it now. But yeah, this guy's very cool. He is, interestingly enough, he's kind of like a melee. Yeah, it's interesting that the Star Host is, it's a sci-fi version of the Saurians, but still trying to maintain some of that faction flavor of being like a melee heavy army. Marco Cruz says, "Grab it." All right, I'll grab it. But I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it well on camera. All right, let me see. Can I switch it to have me be the priority for a second? No. One. No. Do I have to stop sharing? Okay. Check this out. Is it gonna focus? This model looks amazing. Original concept by Samuel, sculpted by Joao, and then painted by Julian. It's very cool. And if you look, actually, you can see in its base. I don't know if you can see it. There's this little detail that there's like gator poking out. I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, yes, very cool model. I have to say. Actually, fuck it. Since I'm already showing you models, check this out. Look at this guy. Big Star Host Gator. Probably one of the coolest models we've ever made. Anyway, okay, back to concepts. Okay. Okay. All right. Going back to it. Wait, is the stream proper? Yes, it seems to be working fine. Oops. What am I doing here? Okay. So yeah. Anyway, cool guy. He's gonna have a cool spear. He's gonna have a cool mount. It's gonna be cool. Whatever. Let's go to the more interesting one, which is, well, the most interesting one, I suppose, which is the Triceratops. So for the Triceratops, yeah, I mean, if you see the rules, of course, you can kind of see how it works. For the Saurians, we didn't want to have any vehicles. We wanted to maintain that faction identity of being dinosaurs riding dinosaurs. And so the Triceratops is actually their transport. Like other factions have an APC. The Saurians have a Triceratops. The Triceratops is interesting as a transport because usually APCs are fast, but in turn are tough six. Whereas the Triceratops is not fast. He just goes regularly 6 inches, 12 inches, and he has he has some melee capability, and he has tough 12, so he's more resilient. So it's a very interesting different type of transport. It comes with a bunch of options. It comes with like this big rocket pod on the back. Um, you can of course use it as a transport, and it also comes with like a gecko crew that uses the same type of guns that you have on the pterodactyl riders and riptrodactyl riders. Um, yeah, very cool. Okay, Star Host. I'm trying to speed up a little bit because I feel like I spent a bunch of time on the studio update, and I don't want to bore you too much with concepts. Okay, so that was the Star Host. Let's take a look at the let's take a look at the Epic Avatar of Plague first. So, Epic Avatar of Plague. So, yeah, first things first, just to clarify, because I saw some confusion. So, just to clarify, there's going to be avatars and epic avatars for all the demon factions. So don't worry about that. The reason you haven't seen some of it yet is because of the way we're releasing. So the regular avatars are being released as loyalty rewards. Right now, the war demons avatar, the Avatar of War, is currently a loyalty reward. Starting in December, the Avatar of Plague and the Avatar of Change are going to be loyalty rewards. And then finally, I think only in like March, something like that, the Avatar of Lust is going to be a loyalty reward. But don't worry, because this month we released the Epic Avatar of War. In November, we have the Epic Avatar of Change. In December, the Epic Avatar of Plague, and then the Epic Avatar of Lust in January. So yeah, the Epic Avatar of Plague, very cool. Epic avatars have like this big beard. We also want to give you a version without the big beard, in case you don't like it. But they have this sort of big beard, and we had this idea of like, well, what if you put the swarmlings inside of the beard? So it's cool. He's a big collector of stuff, so lots of trophies and lots of mushrooms and all of the design cues that we've been talking about over the last few months. Yeah, he's huge. And then we thought, well, usually we try not to have poses that are too static, but we had this idea for this pose for the Epic Avatar of Plague that was just too cool to pass up, and so we made him a throne. Here you can see the general pose and what it looks like. Yep, this is gonna be cool. And here you can actually see how the throne is built. So the throne is actually a sort of like huge carcass, like a huge rib cage kind of thing. And then it's gonna have these cute, the plague. What were they called? The plague throne that is on sort of like these slugs. So have some of the slugs like going around it and lots of cool details. And here you can see a close up of the face. And he has like a special spear. It's it's cool. It's gonna be cool. All right, look. I think you all came here for one reason and one reason only, which is that now we're going to check out the Battle Sisters concept art. So I'm going to start off with. I guess I'm going to show you the evolution of the concept art and how we got to where we are. Before we go into showing you the full concept art, I suppose I will tell you a tiny bit about the history of the Battle Sisters in the lore of Grimdark Future. So let me put a nice picture here as a background. All right. Well, it's tiny. All right, here we go. Okay, so all right, for the uninitiated, the basic lore, the core lore of Grimdark Future kind of works like this. So um, humanity in the far future starts exploring um, the stars. Doesn't get to go very far and starts colonizing our star system and other star systems. Um, and humanity is kind of like united in this one big faction. Um, as they um, as they spread, however, these colonies start seeking independence, um, and causing a lot of trouble. And in turn, as a response, Earth kind of creates the first set of battle armor. So they make these battle armors to kind of like calm down all these rebellions, and things kind of like chill out. Because different planets have different types of populations and different environments and different things. They actually start forming into detachments. So that's actually where the origin of the Battle Brother detachments come from. At this point, they're actually not Battle Brothers yet. At this point, it's just this battle armor that is being used to quell rebellions. In parallel to this, there is this scientist on Earth that basically uh, makes huge advancements in gene modifications, and essentially, creates superhumans, or well, what he defines basically as like the future of humanity, or like the next step in humanity. And this combination of the battle armor and these gene mods put together creates the Battle Brothers. Um, then things happen, and basically the scientist, or well, whoever he is, things are lost a little bit. But he basically has this plan for humanity, for a better future for humanity, a united future for humanity, and he kind of declares himself as the unique ruler of humanity. He declares himself the God King of humanity, and essentially, establishes a sort of like a sort of like dictatorship. And in turn, this sparks a civil war. So, Battle Brother attachments rebel, and you kind of have like this big civil war that is happening in the universe. And in the midst of all of this civil war, things are going south, and it's not really sure what the fate of humanity will be. In a desperate attempt to survive, um, a bunch of colonization ships are launched to essentially just escape Earth, escape our solar system, escape humanity, and start building anew somewhere else. And this is where the story starts really getting to where we currently are, which is that as these fleets escape, the God King and the Battle Brothers basically make chase, and there's these huge space battles, and eventually um, they sort of stumble into this wormhole. A wormhole opens, sucks everyone up, and like scatters humanity in this other galaxy and in the Sirius sector. So this is kind of like the scattering of humanity. And throughout this whole phase of rebellion and the escape and whatever, this is where the story of the Battle Sisters is born. So the Battle Sisters have nothing to do with the Battle Brothers. They have nothing to do with the God King. They have nothing to do with any of that. So basically, the Battle Sisters start with this young woman that essentially saves. I don't want to go into too much detail, but basically, she saves part of humanity during this migration, during this escape. And once humanity reaches the Sirius sector, helps establish humanity in this new place, and she's kind of like this genre of our character, larger than life, heroine, and basically, at some point, she helps protect people and humanity, and she fights, and she essentially sacrifices herself. There's like this huge conflict with the lust demons, and so the let's say the proto Battle Sisters are basically fighting these these lust demons, and she sacrifices herself um, to save humanity, and she dies in the process. And so um, in her dying is where the Battle Sisters are truly formed. So the Battle Sisters are basically these orders of nuns with guns that follow in the footsteps of um, who they call now the God Queen. She never referred to herself as God Queen. It was a name given to her, and it's a bit of a contrast, between like the God King who named himself, and the God Queen who was named by the people. And so now the Battle Sisters basically, they follow in her footsteps, and they try to basically protect people and protect humanity, and do good in the universe. And and then there's more to their faction, but this is kind of like the basic gist. This is the basic outline of the story of them. So because of this story, the Battle Sisters have this very religious theme to them. Okay, so the Battle Brothers, I know people come from 40K and stuff like that, and they think, oh my god, Space Marines is hyper religious, but our Battle Brothers have nothing to do with that story. But our Battle Sisters are religious because of this story, and so you're gonna have a lot of like religious iconography and stuff like that. And here we have this beautiful illustration done by Fran. Amazing artist working with us, and he's the one that's essentially defining many of our factions and the Battle Sisters, of course. And here he made this illustration sort of like as a symbol, as the core central theme symbol of the Battle Sisters, and it's showcasing the God Queen, and how she sacrificed herself, she saved the people of Earth. Um, and like it says here, she saved us, and for her we fight, and that's kind of like their theme. And I thought this illustration was very cool to kind of like show you the thing. I saw a quick question. So the Battle Brothers are not religious. The Battle Brothers are not religious. No, there is nothing really religious about them at all. Yeah, that's not a thing in the OPR universe. Okay, so all right, now that you've learned a little bit about the lore of the Battle Sisters, let's take a look at some of the art, and I will take you through basically, well, from the get-go, like where did we all start. So one of the first things we ever defined, for people that have been patrons for a while, you've probably already seen some of this concept art, but don't worry, I'm also going to show you brand new concept art that has not been revealed yet. So for the Battle Sisters, we basically started with the idea of like, well, how do we make a faction that has this heavily religious theme, um, without going for the classic, gothic style that you usually see in miniatures. So um, Fran from Spain looked into Semana Santa, and he looked into this the Baroque style of religious ceremonies of Semana Santa, which are hyper ornamented, a lot of cloth, these very, I don't even know how to describe them, these hyper detailed shapes, and these sort of like triangular shapes. And so we said, okay, let's start. Um, Says stream is dead. What? Hmm. Is it back? Okay. It appears that the stream is back. Ooh, very cool. All right, nice. I got worried there for a second. Okay, cool. So, guys, we have seen the main Battle Brother armor. Battle Sisters armor. Let's go into the original concept stage. So we defined here kind of like the style and the armor, and then the next step for us is we go into what we call an army overview kind of phase, which is we're showcasing the whole army from top to bottom. So okay, here I'm going to go into detail. I know that if I move the thing too much too often, it kind of freezes and then like renders. So I'm going to try to not move my thing too much so you get to actually see. Okay, so all right, right. We have this theme: nuns with guns, battle sisters, Semana Santa details. So we started exploring, and here you can see, okay, exploring a lot of head shapes. One of the things that we kind of have to solve when making miniatures is, how are you going to do modularity? And in this case, we were kind of seeing like, well, how do you do head swaps? And if you do very long hair or very long veils or anything that touches both the head and the shoulders or other parts of the armor, then it's going to be very difficult to do like a clean cut where people can like swap heads and stuff like that. So here we're kind of experimenting with like, okay, well, first off, what if we don't even show hair, right? So the nuns from Semana Santa actually are fully banded up, so their hair is actually not shown at all. So that's a way to do it. Then we're looking here at like helmets. Then we're looking at like short veils. So yeah, here you can see a lot of styles. You can see already experimenting with like how do you make it more sci-fi. So we have these sort of like gas mask like contraptions. You have the gas tubes. Yeah, lots of detail. The crown, very beautiful, I have to say. And yeah, on the right hand side, you can see some early exploration of symbology. By now we have kind of abandoned this. At the time we were thinking like, what if we use the symbology of the rose? It's a very classic symbol in religion, and it has that feminine side to it. Maybe we will include it as well, but right now we're trying to explore like other things. Okay, let me move this thing a bit to the next section. Okay, cool. All right, here then you can see, yeah, on the top right you can see a more advanced version of the rose concept. Again, not really sure if this is going to make it into it. And here you can actually see, okay, you have the main battle armor that I had shown you before, and now you can see other things. So we have a sort of hero with like a big sensor, beautiful robes, a big sword. We have a sort of heavy fire support unit on the left with some sort of like big cannon and a backpack. And then at the bottom we have the exploration. We have an exploration of a lot of different styles and clothings and really going into shapes, right? Like trying to see like how do we include the shapes, how do we make a halo that's not just a halo, how do we maintain the triangular shapes that we have throughout other places. And then well, we're going to go into later also why, but other things like here in the middle one, we're trying to like see, well, how to incorporate the rose. You can see, okay, we have this idea of like, well, you can use candles. So we have candles everywhere. That's interesting. And yeah, I just saw a question. Can we have short hair sister without helmets? Maybe, to be seen. I will not promise anything right now. Oh, and one thing that's important, yes, like we, as always, we don't want our characters to be sexualized. We don't think it really makes sense. I mean, as always, if there is a character that is specifically about sex, I suppose we could make a more I don't want to say a more sexy character, but a character that fits that theme. So imagine if we were to make, I don't know, characters, um some prostitutes for Da Vinci that kind of like fight. Okay, maybe they're kind of more revealing or something like that because I mean it's their profession, I suppose. Maybe, I'm not sure. Also, doesn't really have to be. So maybe there would make sense, but where it doesn't make sense, of course, we're not going to give these girls boob plate and all that stuff, and make them sexy. That makes no sense for us. Okay, going into more concepts here. Okay, you can see more exploration now, exploring like different things of like backpacks, exploring more of the candle concept. At the top you can see a lot of different like unit styles, different helmets, different poses. um, you can see like the big helm thing on the big mother, as she's called here. And also we can start seeing here at the bottom two concepts for potentially sort of walkers, introducing the organ pipe concept, which we think of course very religious, and having again the spikes, having the candles, having the symbology there. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. And then we go into more vehicles. Yeah, this is the end of the page, so you can see, okay, what could an APC kind of look like. It's very rough, but here we truly are exploring shapes. So it's, it has these spikes, it has the candles, it has all of these things. I really like the motorcycle. I think with just a little bit of cleanup, this could actually be the final design. I think it looks very cool. And then at the bottom we have this sort of like tank, you know, filled with candles and sort of like sensors and stuff like that. And I think that's a little turret with a battle system at the top. Okay, so this was like the concept overview that we did. This was very cool, much approved. And now we go into the latest concept. So this is um, yeah, I literally got this page yesterday, today. Actually, today I saw a more advanced version, but I only have the version from yesterday. Sorry. But check this out. So, all right. So this is what an exploration looks like right now, and I will take you through each step so you can kind of understand how we actually design things. So, starting at the top right, we can see that one of the first things that we focus on is the basic shapes. So, what is the shape language that they use and why? And then, based on that, all of the designs will continue down that path. So yeah, you can see that the basic things that they have are here on the right. You can actually see like a breakdown of various elements that we use. So we have like the tunic, we have this kind of like shoulder thing. Everything is written in Spanish, sorry, but we have these sort of like large opening robes, kind of like a poncho almost. And one thing you can see in all these shapes is that they are very triangular. So we saw that there was this thing of the triangular shape from the whole Semana Santa thing and the Baroque, the religious, and so on and so forth. And then we thought, okay, well, how do we take the shape and have it make sense within the context of the armor? And this is where I'm going to shift the focus for a second to this illustration, which is, you can see that the God Queen has these wings. And so the wings being a symbol of the God Queen is also kind of like this triangular shape. And so we abstract this shape of the wings and then start applying it in different places. So in a way, the shoulder pads are an abstraction of the shape of the wing, the way that the helmets work, this part that they have at the bottom of their tunic, and um, all of these things sort of like come together to form the basic shapes. And then with these basic shapes, we start exploring other things. So one of the things that we explore are assets. Symbols. Well, let's go for symbols first. One of the things we explore are symbols. So trying to see like, well, how can we use these shapes that we have now defined in symbols, and then what symbols make sense within the context of the faction. So and within the context of the theme, right? So this very religious theme. So we have the Baroque elements, the highly detailed things. We have the skulls. Somehow religion always also brings this kind of like macabre thing of like the skulls. We have, of course, halos. We have a book. We have these like script. I'm not sure what they're called. These little bands which have like writing on them. parchment? I don't know. Whatever. So yeah, you can see here a lot of these. So taking those original shapes, the triangular shapes, taking the inspiration from the Baroque, taking the inspiration from the religious, and then putting it together and combining it into our own thing. And then from there, we go into some ideas for assets. So here you can see a bunch of ideas for, a sort of like staff. You can see ideas for gloves. You can see ideas for just random props, a bullet, a chalice, belt buckles. So one thing that, for instance, we kind of learned from when we were designing the Ratman is like we can really infuse a faction with theme, even in the smallest of details. So like a belt buckle could have this very Baroque theme to it. And then some other things. We have a chandelier, and we have like another like armor. We have this sort of like skull in armor thing, which looks very cool. Yeah, and finally we move on to the last part, which is the weapons. Unfortunately, so we actually have a much more advanced version of these weapons. Unfortunately, I don't have it here right now, so I cannot show you. But to kind of guide you to like the design, the way that we were designing is like, um, we basically are first we're exploring just basic shapes of weapons, and then Fran had this idea of like, well, what if you take just like, if you look at a bunch of props from Semana Santa, so for instance like chandeliers, and if you take those props and you just tilt them to the side, and you just modify them a little bit, they make for really cool weapon shapes. So today we were working on the design of actually the special weapons, so like the flamethrower, the plasma, the shred, and the fusion. And yeah, there's some really cool designs there that are coming together. Um, yeah, but it's still all being worked on. So that is the overall gist for the Battle Sisters. Um, like I said, right now we are still making the basic concepts. Next week we're making the blockouts, and then with that we are making the pre-concepts for all of the units. And once that is done, yeah, basically next week or so, um, the next 2 weeks, we're basically starting to make the core troops, the core battle sister troops, and then yeah, and then from there we start working on everything else, and we start preparing the pack for the December release. Very exciting. It's cool. Battle Sisters were actually one of the first factions we ever made. So it's very cool to go back and to go back and get to work on them, bringing all the expertise, everything we learned over the last 2 years, is kind of like coming together um, with these designs. Okay, so all right, that's it for the Battle Sisters. I am going to switch again to the other thing. What was it? To the background video. Okay, cool. All right, and now we go into a short Q&A session. So I'm going to do the following. So I'm looking here. We have about 10 questions from the thing. I don't want to take up too much time. Maybe I'm gonna say max 30 minutes. So what I'm gonna do is, let's do the following. I'm going to go through the questions that people posted beforehand, and then in the meantime, you guys can start posting your own questions here. And once I finish answering these, I will go for those, and then we wrap it up. Okay, so all right, I'll just go from top to bottom. What was your favorite moment from creating the demon armies? Oof. I'm gonna be honest. So making the demons was a very stressful process. It's hard to say what was the favorite moment. Maybe finishing them is the favorite moment. No, I guess really seeing them come together. Demons, for a lot of these worlds and factions, I kind of have a very not super clear idea, but I have quite a strong idea of like what what everything is going to look like, and how does this world work, and blah blah blah. And when it came to the demons, it was one of those things where it's like, it was a little bit of a blank slate. I kind of had a rough idea of what I wanted for the Demons of War, but not really anything for the other factions. And so I think my favorite moment was once I actually saw them all come together, and it was like, oh, this is real. And in a way, it was like I had four favorite moments. Like the first time I saw all of the war, like the Demons of War ready, I was like, okay, this is amazing. And then I was like, oh, Demons have changed. I don't know how they're gonna be. And then they looked amazing. That was great. And I was like, oh, Plague was the one where we had to like play around with the most. And once they were ready, that was amazing. And Lust as well. Like Lust again, like I know a lot of people are not really into the whole thing of like the snake ladies, but I think they came out really awesome. Yeah, so maybe the favorite moments were when I saw each of the factions come together for the first time in a full concept that worked. Um, Streaming or showing a video of creating one of the 3D models was briefly discussed. Could we show the process of record? I don't know. Making 3D models takes a long time. I don't know that we could like show it off on stream. Maybe. I mean, I'm thinking like maybe a time lapse. I don't know. What would be more likely, if anything, would be if any of our sculptors are happy to do to stream themselves working on the official Discord. That could happen. It would have to be discussed between us and them. Yeah, if any of you guys are listening from the team, let me know what you think, and we can discuss that. Having a new wiki, have you considered adding the basic rulebook as an online version? We had at some point thought about doing the to provide the books in an online version through the web app. Who knows? Maybe it could happen. I'm not sure. It's a little bit more overhead because now there's more pieces to control and check, and but could be. We'll have to see. Do you plan on fleshing out the armies one at a time, or do you plan on releasing one release for every faction before fleshing them out? No. So we are every time we're releasing an army, we're releasing pretty much the full army, at least until the state of that army there, before we move to the next army. You mentioned that Ratman and Sisters could take 5 or 6 months. If a patron is only interested in fantasy but has no interest in Ratman, this seems like a really long time. Is there any thoughts on part of OPR on how to mitigate these long release cycles? Do you see this as a problem? Honestly, no. This is how we always did things. Ratmen are just a very big army. They're like 30 plus units. So, most armies are smaller. Some armies are very small, and so they can be released in 2 releases or 3 releases, like the Jackals. But some armies are just very big. I understand that not everybody wants to support for 5-6 months to always get the same army and get the full army. I don't know. We can't please everyone. I think it is what it is. I also think I would like to think we offer such a great deal that I hope it's worth it for you. Even if like for you're supporting for 5-6 months and maybe you're not interested in an army at that moment, you're getting so much content over those 5-6 months. From just like different armies and then terrain and then the markers and objectives and bases and the epic models and the loyalty rewards and the welcome packs and the stuff from the welcome packs on top of that, like the dice and the tokens and all that stuff. And then on top of that, you get the games, and then you get the missions, and then you get the betas, and then soon enough you're gonna start getting like early access to the stories, and then you're gonna have the point calculator, and then you're gonna like. I would hope that even if you're not particularly interested in what is coming out at that moment, like that army, we provide enough content for you to still want to support us. But of course, I think it depends on how you view it, right? Like if for you it's like, hey, I'm paying for a Patreon subscription because I'm supporting this company. That's one thing. If you're seeing like I'm paying for a specific item, that's a different thing, and it's fine too. If you're just here to grab items and go, and you don't interested in what's coming next, no worries. Like, just unsubscribe. We'll keep you posted. And then whenever a new army comes out that you're interested in, you can pick it up. And if you're, maybe in the future you're interested in that army anyway, you can always pick it back up with the discount code. So, yeah. All right. Are there any plans to release rules or models for the Saurian Starhost fleet for Grimdark Future FTL? Yes, there's gonna be a Saurian Starhost fleet for FTL. Is OPR planning to do? Okay, is OPR planning to do sci-fi Ratman models? And if so, what art style will they follow? Yes, they are planned. What the art style will be, I don't want to review yet because there are a couple of different styles that we might do, and we need to experiment. And so I don't want to say anything yet. One thing I can say is you can expect, well, in my idea, the Ratmen of the sci-fi version are a little bit darker than the ones from the fantasy version, but not evil. They are actually kind of good guys in well, everyone, whatever. But yes, they're kind of good guys in the sci-fi universe, but they still look a little bit roughed up. Let's say that's the style, maybe. The new armies have some great feel to them, I suppose. Oh, Jackal's Dynasty Star Host. I suppose this guy's talking about the rules. So the new armies have a great feel to them. In my opinion, it makes several of the older armies feel dated or less engaging. Has there been discussion of thoughts of adjusting army-specific special units for older armies? Yes, I agree. I agree that some of the older armies don't feel as engaging as some of the new armies. There are some restrictions there, of course, because these three armies that you're talking about are all original OPR armies. So we kind of can do whatever we want with them. We decide which units to put. We decide which models to create. So it's a little bit different. But yes, I would like to at some point do like a big review of essentially all of the armies from all of the games and kind of see like, okay, um, where is an army a little bit vague, where is it lacking flavor, where can things be enhanced, and so on and so forth. Okay, talking again about rules, there has been a lot of discussion over the utility of elite units versus regular units in mass of 20 outperforming a group of 10. Okay, so a little bit of context. This guy's talking about Age of Fantasy. So in Age of Fantasy, um, in Age of Fantasy, core army units, so basic infantry, 5+5+ infantry, common units of 10, which can then be doubled up into units of 20, whilst elite units, common units of 5, which can then be doubled up in units of 10. So essentially, this means that elite for a big unit of elites is still only half as big as a big unit of core infantry. Yes, there is a reason. There is a reason why it's like this, and it's because I guess it's because of the relative utility, right? So before, actually, elite units used to come in blocks of 10, so you could have blocks of 10 or 20. And what happened is there was really no reason for you to take a basic unit unless maybe you had like some points left or you really, really, really needed some chaff. And so this is kind of one of the ways we balance their utility. So, um, you know, a, a, a very elite unit is going to have higher quality, higher armor. It's going to have fearless. It's going to have stronger weapons. It's going to have AP2, AP3. It's going to have special rules. It's going to have ambush. It's going to have something cool, and that kind of that kind of makes up for its small size. Whereas, the basic infantry are just they're big. They have 5+5+. They die real easy. They don't hit shit, and that's kind of like the balance between the two of them. Okay, so that was the 10 questions from the other thing. So let me take a look at questions from here. Okay, when designing units, do you have a hard time balancing what people expect them to look like versus doing your own unique designs for them? I suppose you mean when designing them in terms of. Are you talking about when you're designing the models? I suppose you're talking about the models design. No, I don't think the hard thing is balancing between what people expect them and doing our own designs. Um, because I'm gonna be honest, we 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 cannot care too much about what people's expectations are. Um, I know that there is a lot of people that are just looking for copycat models. They're just looking for a 3D printable version of armies made by other manufacturers. But that's not what we do, and that's not what we care to do. I'm not here to make that. I'm here to create my own universe. I'm here to create my own factions. I'm here to create my own style. So we can only care so much. The more important thing is, how do we make sure that something that we want to make because we think looks really cool still makes sense, to be used as a proxy, or to make sense within the expectations of people. That's where there can be a challenge, because okay, just gonna give you an example. So we have our faction of Ratman, and they have rules for ogres, and they have rules for like these giant beasts and these beast mounts as well. And so in a more, let's say, evil version of them, of course these bigger beasts are like mutations and they're monsters and stuff like that. And so some people of course expect that, but in our version it makes no sense that they're like that. So that's where we kind of had to think like, okay, how do we give these guys a big monster that can fulfill that role, but that looks like something that makes sense within our own faction? So that's where the challenge truly is. Any news on 15 millimeters, 20 millimeters army? So just to clarify, the armies are going to be 6 mil, 10 mil, 15 mil, not 20 mil. Of course, you can scale up to 20 mil if you want. Any news? So STLs are done for a lot of them. Unfortunately, especially with the big rush of the demons, I haven't had a lot of time to work on that. So the files still need to be double checked. Everything kind of like needs to be checked for consistency. Everything then needs to be also properly exported for the 3 different scales. And then everything also is still going to need to be fully supported, which is going to bring its own challenges. And on top of that, we would like to start releasing with the games. For me, it only makes sense that we start releasing small scale models if we also have the small scale rules at the same time. And also, I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I am thinking that it would be very good that when we launch, imagine like we start launching our 6 mil line, 10 mil line, whatever, our small scale line of Age of Fantasy models, that we launch with 2 armies and not with just one. Sure, we could launch with one and launch sooner, but I think, especially for people that only really care to buy OPR products, it's like, if we just give you one army, what are you going to do with that? You can't play. And especially because a lot of people don't have 10 mil models from other manufacturers. Yeah. So the news are, it's all in the works. Don't worry, we have not stopped. Nothing is stopped. But it's still in the works. It's still going to take some time. I would not expect them before the end of the year, for sure. Okay. Is there one faction you felt compelled to shoot in your lore army that you particularly struggled to get inspiration for? Some of them. I'm not a big fan of detachments, but they were easy to implement. I think the ones we struggled with the most, but it's interesting because the ones we struggled with the most are also somehow the ones that ended up being very inventive. So Inquisition is one of them. Inquisition was kind of like, how does that even make sense? How can we even have it make sense within our lore? And we actually found a way to make them make sense, because they are kind of like, religious Inquisition, let's say, kind of thing. So they're actually connected to the lore of the Battle Sisters and not to the lore of the Battle Brothers. So we found a way to make them make sense. Other factions, some of the fantasy games have a lot of undead factions. So it was like, how do we make sure that those are cool? Halflings, I definitely didn't want our halflings to be just your regular run of the mill, Lord of the Rings copy. So those were a little bit of a thing. Yeah, but overall, I don't know. Overall, it all worked out. It's kind of cool, gotta say. Um, is there any place where we can find all of this amazing artwork in one place? If you're talking about the artwork that you're seeing right now here, yes, you go on our website, you go on the news section, and we post new artwork every week. Are there any other world cultures or reference are you interested to see in new models? Yes, there are a lot of different cultures that I think are underrepresented in miniature war games that I would be interested in seeing. Um, a lot of them, unfortunately, I think we will have to. Unfortunately, a lot of them I think will require new original armies, which also means it will take longer to make them because newer armies, whilst they're cool, also you always run the risk of having less demand for them. They're a bigger risk for the company, and also people are expecting to play with the armies that they already know. But yes, there are some cultures that I think would be very cool. I think, for instance, that just sub-Saharan Africa underrepresented, even North Africa underrepresented, India underrepresented. Um, yeah, strange actually when you think about it. I know that like the old Warhammer games had kind of like references to them with like Ind or whatever the faction was called, but yeah, not really much of that. Yeah, interesting. Anyway, um, bu- 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 are you planning to do fantasy, sci-fi, humans, elves, orcs anytime soon? Anytime soon, I don't know about how soon. As always, when it's ready. But it is important to understand that yes, we are thinking about it. So one of the problems that we're running into now that we're doing like the world guides and the faction guides and all that stuff is that there is a lot of factions which are like core to how the stories begin, to the central part of the stories, for which we don't have sculpts and for which we don't even have art. We don't have nothing. And so I think in the next year or two, one of our focuses, one of the things we're going to focus on is making sure that we can start filling out those armies, not just because, of course, because we want to solve this problem of them being a core part of the lore and we don't have art for them. Um, but also because people want them, right? Like, and we want them as well. We want to see orcs. We want to see elves. We want to see dwarves. So, yeah. Um, mm, 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 oops, the thing skipped. Uh, is there any plan to involve the community into lore and/or army concepts? Not at this point so much. So yes, we're always, I always have open ears to the community, and I'm always, on the Discord, and I sometimes I throw questions out there, and I lurk, and I discuss with people. But generally speaking, we are currently in the phase where um, we have all of this setting, which is already established, and things are connected, and it's really cool. It's just a matter of getting it out there. Once it's out there, I think that we can start having more community involvement in the actual shaping of like new factions and like the future of the setting and stuff like that. But I think first we need to get the setting out there. Once the setting is out there and people also fully understand how everything makes sense, how things are connected, where things are, then we can start to involve the community more. For now, the most that the community can really like have some fun with the lore is once it's going to be out more. The writing jams, we have 3 writing jams a year, and those are going to be a cool opportunity, especially once the new lore is out, to help people focus on like, okay, explore some part of the lore, and have some fun. What release sequels do the 2D versions follow? The 2D versions follow the original release of the army. So we originally started with the release of robots were one of our first armies, so we're doing robots. What's the other one? Mummies were one of our first armies, so we're doing mummies. So just think about like what came after. So after the mummies came the Saurians, so you can expect that the Saurians are the next fantasy 2D release. After Robot Legions, I think the next army was the Dynasty, but we already did them, so then it's gonna be the Jackals. Yeah, I think it's the Jackals. The Alien Hives right now are on hold because we're doing a bit of a redesign. But once that redesign is done, you can expect this as well. Any plans to do Havoc Sisters? Not for now. Mm, 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 mm. Are there any plans for lore short stories or documents so we can dig into lore? Yes, we're going to be releasing 2 short stories a month every month. That's the plan for the future. Are there good guys, or is every faction some kind of messed up? So we don't like to think of any faction truly as good guys or bad guys. It's just a matter of perspective. So even a faction like Havoc, they're not in our universe. They're not just a bad guy faction. They have their own motivations. They have their own reasons why they do the things they do, and you can empathize with them. You can understand them. So yeah, it's there are no inherent good guys. Now, of course, you could say like, well, there are some that are like the Battle Sisters. You know, they kind of like want to help out. So you could say, well, they are good guys. But I'm sure they also do their fair share of bad stuff too. I'm really excited to see how you will design your own space dwarves. I'm glad that OPR wants to do its own design. Do you have already a rough timeline looking at them? So we already have a rough idea of how our space dwarves are going to look like. If you're a Patreon subscriber, check out posts from around January 2022, and there you will see the concept art for them. About timeline of them coming out, no idea. I know that with the Leagues of Voten coming out, a lot of creators have felt pressured, and a lot of players have already tried or have felt the need to pressure us into making dwarves. But I don't think we should do that. I don't think we should just rush into making space dwarves just because the Leagues of Voten just came out. Sure, maybe is it a missed business opportunity? Maybe. I don't think, but I don't think we should mess up our own plans just to follow somebody else's release queues. So there is no timeline. Do you think you will do any cyberpunk themed faction or armies? So all of our gang wars armies, in the way that I'm conceptualizing them, visualizing them, are going to be cyberpunk. So if what's it called? If Necromunda is very like 80s punk vibes, you can expect gang wars to be much more future cyberpunk tech, high tech, cyberpunk tech, whatever thing. Ever think of doing 5e stats? No, there is no way we're doing anything related to somebody else's game system. Where will the lore live? So the lore will live like this. It will be available in the army books, as always. We're going to have probably at the beginning of the basic rulebook or whatever it's called. We're going to have like a page kind of like of intro lore. We are going to have the short stories available on our website. We're going to have the world guides, which are also going to be available on our website for free. And then we're going to have the faction guides, which are going to be available through, first through Patreon and then through Wargame Vault. Still seeing if and how much of that content we're able to already give out for free. But yeah, you can expect some part of the lore to be free. You can expect most of the lore to be free, and then some of it to be paid. So it's going to live somewhere between army books, website, and paid content. These 50mm armies would be for fantasy or sci-fi first. Unclear, might happen both at the same time. Will we get faction markers with their symbols on mark captured objectives? Will we get faction markers with their symbols to mark capture? Not sure I fully understand this question. So I'm going to say no. Okay. Cool. I see that all the questions have been answered. We are almost at the 2-hour mark. I think this is a good time to stop. I hope everybody enjoyed this new style of this stream, where we do studio update, then preview of the concepts, and then Q&A. 2-hour mark. Honestly, it's not bad. I think that's I think that's something we can target for the future as well. Hopefully, like I always say, over this past year, so many things have been set up in the background that are not ready for release yet. So there is a lot of stuff coming that I don't really get to talk about yet. But soon as things get revealed, I suppose also there's going to be more stuff to talk about in the streams. About new factions, new games, new lore, new short stories, and all the cool stuff that is coming out. All right. Um, Thank you very much, everyone. Please, for those that were live, provide your feedback. If you have any feedback, thoughts, ideas, whatever, about the streams, provide them in the Discord general chat. And for those that are watching after, leave your thoughts in the comments. We will try to make sure to read all the comments and see what we can follow up on. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.